I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. And all my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You will lead me through the fire, and in darkest night you were close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God, yeah. And all my life you have been faithful. Oh, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God, yeah. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running, it keeps running after me. And all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna sing. Oh, 'cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. With every breath, oh, for all my days.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that song. It doesn't connect so much to the message I'm going to give, but I came across it, and I had heard it a long time ago, but it just really opened up my heart and reminded me of how blessed we are in our life and how good God is to us. Although we get caught up sometimes on our own difficulties or frustrations or things that aren't going the way that we want, but God is really good. So today I'm going to be continuing on our sermon series on reflections from True Mother's memoirs, Mother of Peace. And the topic, the inspiration that I got from it this week is revolutionary love. But before I go into many quotes from the autobiography, I'm going to actually start with Jesus in the Bible. And this is a really beautiful quote I'm sure you're familiar with. It's from Matthew 5:43 to 48. You have heard it that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So when Jesus said this was like revolutionary talk here. Because until then, it was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and love your neighbor but hate your enemy, and fight for what's yours, and if you need to take it from somebody else, that's okay too. But so this was a simple phrase, it was simple words, but it was not taught up to this point in history. But not only did he teach it and talk about it, Jesus was the person who led by example, and he lived it. Jesus was just as determined to love the tax collectors and the prostitutes and the pagans and the people on the other side of the Sea of Galilee than as he was to love the Jews and to teach the Jews. And to the very end of his life, when he prayed for the very people who were killing him and asked God to forgive them because they knew not what they were doing. But how can we find this kind of love for people? I think it's easy to say, well, Jesus is a different kind of person. Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus was sinless. Jesus could do this. You know, Jesus asked us to also do that and be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect. But it's not a simple favor. It's not like, hey, can you go to the grocery store and pick up something for me? Oh, yeah, I can go do that. I'll just hop in my car and go do that. It's not like an action. Like, oh, do you mind, picking this up for me? Or do you mind cleaning that up when you're done? It's a different kind of ask, because it's not something we can just tell our body to do. Loving our enemy or loving anybody, it is an action, but it also has to come from the heart. So I think that there's actually a very crucial key that's actually, there's like a hint in Jesus' words here. Twice. That pray for those who persecute you, love your enemies, that you may be the children of your Father in heaven. And, if this thing will work, okay. And to be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I want to also take a quote from True Mother that I got from her autobiography, because it also gives us a clue. If we were to capture the distinctive feature of the unification movement in one phrase, it would be the culture of filial heart. Filial heart, for which I coined the Korean word hyojang, signifies sincere devotion and love toward our heavenly parent. So what I'm getting here is that on my own, from my own perspective and my own experiences and my own life, it's not easy. In fact, it might be impossible to love an enemy, to love somebody that I have lots of reasons not to love. But the key is that we have to recognize God's perspective as our parent and recognize our relationship to God. Not that God is separate from us, but I'm a child of God, and I can take God's perspective, and with God's perspective, I can love even the unlovable. So as I've been reading through True Mother's autobiography, The Mother of Peace, it's just like every page is a reminder that this is the type of life that our true parents have lived. Their lives are like a century-long display of what it is to forgive those who hurt you, to love your enemy, to pray for them and to give to them. It's like a display of what this revolutionary love looks like. But I want to share just a couple of examples from the book. And one of them is from when our true parents went to go visit Kim Il-sung in North Korea. So I don't know how much all of you know about the history of North Korea and South Korea, and North Korea is a communist country. Even now, it still is. Kim Il-sung's grandson is running it. But Reverend and Mrs. Moon experienced the direct consequences of the actions of Kim Il-sung, where they were forced to leave their hometowns, which are very important to Koreans, and leave behind their relatives, and many of them never got to see them again. Many of them were killed. There was so much famine and disease and injustices that were just their daily life because of that. But they wanted to go to give a message. They wanted to give God's message to Kim Il-sung. They wanted to embrace him and to open the doors to reconciliation, because as much as I'm sure it's easy to not want to go to the person who hurt you, they recognize from God's perspective that the unity of North and South Korea, the peace in the world, is more important. So they decided they were going to do it. They set a date. They said by the end of this year, I think it was 1991, we're going to meet Kim Il-sung. And in November, Kim Il-sung sent an invitation to them. So before they left for North Korea, and they didn't actually tell almost anybody that they were going to go, because they thought they would try to stop them because it's so dangerous. But they went to Hawaii. They went to Hawaii to pray and to prepare their hearts before they left. And I'm going to start with some words from there. Arriving in Hawaii, my husband and I lived at the workshop site and concentrated our minds in prayer. Before setting foot in North Korea, we had to resolve any painful feelings knotted up in our hearts. We had to forgive Kim Il-sung, whose regime had hurt the nation and world, not to mention our extended family and ourselves. If we had thought of him only as our enemy, we could not have forgiven him. Only in the position of parents, only with the heart of his mother could I forgive. To save her son sentenced to death, a mother will even seek to change the laws of her country. That is what the maternal heart is like. With that heart, I pledged to forgive my enemy. I did not pray for a safe return from North Korea. And so you have to realize that them going into North Korea, they realize that they may not return. There's no embassies in North Korea. There's no free press in North Korea. There's nobody who's going to stand up for them or say, oh, that's, if they were to be kidnapped or put into jail, there would nobody be like, oh, that's wrong. It was like being completely vulnerable and going into the most dangerous place. At that time, visitors from the free world visited North Korea at the risk of their lives. My husband and I were co-founders of a religion that communists hated and leaders of a global movement to end communism. The goal is to end communism. They're going to a communist country. Our trip to North Korea was not for the sake of joint economic ventures. We didn't go with a duplicative motive, feigning interest in North Korea's benefit while actually being there for our own benefit. Such is typical of the political world, but that was not on our minds. For the sake of genuinely following the providential will, we went only with the heart of God to enlighten and lovingly embrace the communist leaders and open the way for genuine unification. We entered that land relying only on God and advised its supreme leader to receive heaven's decree. So if you read the book, she talks about what True Father told the leaders before they actually met Kim Il-sung. They met with many of his top leaders, and they gave him a chance to speak to them, and he was telling them communism is wrong. God is real. And by the way, you shouldn't be a leader if you can't control your own sex organ. He's telling this to people to their faces. And everybody, and True Mother and the other people who accompanied them are like, oh boy, that's it. We're definitely blew our chance to meet with Kim Il-sung, and maybe we're going to end up in jail, But True Father said what he had to say. And then, a couple of days later, Kim Il-sung said, okay, I'll see you. I think that just that genuineness makes you curious, right? Anyway, so they got to meet with him, and you can read about how they embraced him. And then one of the first things True Father said is God is real and communism has to end. But then they talked about hunting and fishing, and he complimented True Mother's beautiful dress, and they opened up their hearts, and then they started talking about what they could do to work together to benefit Korea and work towards reunification. So ever since then, actually, Kim Il-sung and his son and his grandson have always extended their birthday greetings and their well wishes to our true parents, and I feel has really provided a link between North Korea and South Korea and the rest of the world that if you're completely shut off from somebody, I realize this in my own life. If I completely shut off myself from another person or from who they are or what they think, and I think that they're just wrong, I can think of all kinds of terrible things about them, and I can judge them unnecessarily. We actually had this experience going to Mike's relatives at Christmas this year, because we've had some of his cousins are very, very, very evangelical Christians, and it can be a little hard coming as a different type of Christian into their family household and to celebrate Christmas with them. And we've had a few difficult conversations or experiences, and it had been a long time since we'd seen them. So as we were heading into Christmas season and looking towards visiting them, a few times I told Mike, I'm really not looking forward to this. I think this is going to be rough. and I started to imagine. I picked all the worst points of my experiences with them, and that's what I imagined them as being. That's what it started to happen in my heart. And I even created a scenario of what I thought was going to happen. It was just like I had just made a barrier. I made a wall. But when we went, actually none of those things that I was worried about happened. And we actually had a very lovely time with his cousins and family. And we really shared warmth and heart, even though we knew we had differences. And it was like this little connection was made again. And that connection keeps me from putting up the barrier again. So I think of it as kind of like, this is what's happened with North Korea and South Korea, because of true mother and because of true father and the connection that they've made, then neither the North or South or true parents or Kim Il-sung can completely cut off from, vilify the other side, because there's a connection of heart there. So I really see that's the value of what true parents did at that time. Anyway, one more paragraph from this section. Looking back, I reflect that it was at the moment communism reached its zenith that my husband and I risked our lives to go to Moscow and Pyongyang. With joyful hearts, as representatives of the free world, we embraced enemies who had severely persecuted us. By our doing so, they were moved and we could reconcile. Thus, we laid the foundation for unification and peace. We went to North Korea not to get something, but to give genuine, true love. For the sake of God, my husband and I forgave the unforgivable. For the sake of humanity, we loved the unlovable. So I feel like it's just so precious that we have these examples to learn from, because we don't see these types of examples in our day-to-day life very often. This is not what's taught or encouraged or exemplified by almost anything we can see in the world around us these days. Not in popular culture, not in social media, not on the news. The news and social media is where we see all the injustice. We see all the pain. We see all the wrongs, all the indignation, and then we feel it. But there's no solution being offered that allows us to heal the hearts of the people who are experiencing the injustice and the pain, and our own hearts as well. And this is because we can't solve these problems and heal hearts looking only from my viewpoint. When we're looking only from a humanistic viewpoint. So Jesus gave us a clue, Mother gave us a clue. We have to do this as the children of our Father in heaven. That only in the position of parents could they forgive Kim Il-sung. And only with the heart of God who loves all of his children, even the worst ones, then can we overcome our own pain and frustration with others. You know, I feel like I am just a little itty-bitty person trying to practice this, and I've tried to draw on some experiences in my own life, and they just pale in comparison to Jesus' example and true parents' example. But I will say that some of the best experiences in my life have been when I have chosen to forgive and to love when it was not what I was feeling like doing. In my own family, sometimes I have experiences with my own father, and even with my own husband. I'm sure you have experiences where there's times when you feel like your family is your enemy. But it's only when we choose to dig deep and see that person, even seeing my own father from a parental point of view, can I forgive and love. Seeing my husband from a parental perspective. I also have experiences of when I feel like I was so overwhelmed by all the things that I had to do and all the things on the schedule, and like I was just spread thin, like in the Lord of the Rings, like too little butter over too much bread, you know, that I don't have any more capacity. But I have experience of in those moments, if I, instead of looking at what was going on around me and all the things I had to do, if I actually prayed and looked to God and asked, God, what is most important to you right now that I could do? I always find something else to add into my schedule, and it's actually the most important thing that I could do and the most rewarding thing I could do, and it has the most benefit to all the people involved. I remember organizing a ladies' Christmas party in the middle of the Christmas season. I love Christmas, but I hate Christmas because it's just so much stuff that parents and wives have to organize. But I just remember in the middle of all that, I took a pause and I was like, God, what can I do for you actually that is more valuable than the wrapping the presents and the Christmas cards and all these things, which I should do, but I know they're not really that important to you. And I've just kind of got this view of all the other ladies and moms in our community who are doing the exact same thing. And I felt they needed time to receive love, and they needed time to come together and to experience that. So I remember organizing this Christmas party in the middle of everything else going on, and it was like it was not what was in my natural desire to do, but with God's perspective, it was like, this is the most important thing I can do right now, and it was so rewarding. So this past week was Camp Lone Star, and originally Mike and I were invited with our whole family to go down to Texas and to participate and to give all the talks, and we were really looking forward to that, and it didn't happen that way, but it was virtual. And so we gave a couple of talks for them through Zoom. And when I'm talking to middle school and high school kids, I talk to you guys more. I don't talk to the middle school and high school kids that often. But I really tried to remember back to what it was like when I was in middle school and high school and put myself in their shoes. And so I was recalling what it was like for me back then. And I remember I didn't enjoy middle school and high school very much. I was a little bit of an outsider. Sometimes made fun of behind my back. And even though I often felt anger at the injustice of it, actually, if you look through a few of my journals, you'll find some days where I'm angrily scribbling out my emotions about that. But I am proud that I also looked to have compassion toward these people who were bugging me. I really could have compassion for them because I saw that these are just poor kids whose life and perspective is actually so limited that they can't even see me for who I am. And actually their futures looked less promising than mine. And so I took care never to spread rumors or to respond in anger. And actually, by the end of high school, by my senior year, I had earned the respect of my classmates and my teachers. And I could have a nice conversation with anybody in my class, whether it was the redneck cowboy or the nerd or the volleyball star, or whatever. It was I just felt like I was there and I could be me and people knew me for me, and it was like a victory that I was able to claim through my time in high school. But I recognized that if I had retaliated against the people who had hurt me, that it would have been a very different end to my high school experience. So those are a few of small things that I could think of where I could practice a little bit of this parental love and to my enemies or to people that are not easy to love. And I feel that they're very small, and certainly I feel like that there are a lot of opportunities I missed to do that in my life. And my prayer probably should be that I can see these opportunities when they arise, that I can practice this revolutionary love. But those experiences are very memorable to me. They're very precious to me. They're some of the best experiences in my life. Because real love, true love, revolutionary love, it's not just a thing you give. It's like a transformational experience. It can transform your own heart and the people that you're loving. So another amazing thing about our true parents is that they aren't just concerned with what's happening in the moment today. Sometimes I feel like I want them to be more concerned with what's going on right now. But that's not God's perspective, because what's happening right now is just a result of what's happened in the past, and is not as important as what's going to happen in the future. So, but they have the same heart toward all people who have ever lived on this earth, who are here now, and who will come. So I was reading this section in the autobiography where True Mother, just a few years ago, went to Austria, and she gave a speech in Vienna. And it was really beautiful. But some members there reminded her, just a few miles away is the concentration camp from when Hitler had all these Jews murdered. And she had just come from Africa, where she did a liberation for Goree Island, for all the slaves who had been passed through the island and had died on the journey and been sold into slavery, and prayed from the heart of a parent to liberate these people. And so when they told her about this concentration camp, then she sent special representatives to hold a liberation ceremony in Mauthausen. They presented lilies, which represent eternal love, and offered special prayers, opening the gate to alleviate the suffering of those tormented souls. They prayed that those people, now in the spirit world, could release their sadness and resentment and find their way to the realm of blessing and joy that God has prepared for us all. It is important to build memorials and educate people about historical wrongs. Still, the higher priority is to release the bitter anguish and anger harbored by those who came before us and who suffered and died unjustly. So as I was reading these words and thinking about what it was like, what it took for true parents to love and forgive, Kim Il-sung, I just feel like even though these are things that happened in the past, and these words are just as relevant today. True Mother finished her autobiography, last year, and it was published this year. And I'm sure that she didn't know the details of all the things that we'd be facing in this year, in 2020. She didn't know what the exact circumstances of this year would be when she wrote this book. And yet I feel it's so timely. And there are lessons that are not only applicable now, but they're really desperately needed. I know that each one of us has been impacted by coronavirus and impacted by the things going on socially, racially, in our government and all over the world. So there's not one of us who can say, oh, that doesn't affect me, or that doesn't bother me, or it's not important to my life. But I really feel that while we experience it personally, we can't just judge the experiences or react to them personally. We have to look from the perspective of a parent. We have to go to God for real healing and for genuine relationships to happen. And it's not easy, but I love this quote by True Mother, also from her autobiography. No matter who you are, you will not experience only sweetness and joy on the path to the kingdom of heaven. Wouldn't you think that the path of the kingdom of heaven should be like beautiful and, lined by flowers and a beautiful drive? No, sometimes maybe, but you will not only experience sweetness and joy on the path to the kingdom of heaven. Going through spiritual struggle is, in fact, a most precious blessing. Through it, you can feel the grace of God. Only when you pass those tests can you be born anew as a true human being. I think that's it. Oh, the fruit of perseverance will grow and ripen within you, and one day will become the source of your deepest pride. So I encourage you that whatever you're feeling confronted with through these months or these difficulties, whether it has to do with what's going on around you, or maybe it's just in your own family, or maybe it's just within your own self, I really encourage you not to try to avoid it. Also, not to try to judge it based on the standards of the world, but to go through the spiritual struggle to find what is God's perspective on myself, on any other parties involved? And how can I be a representative of that love in this situation? So that's what I'm going to finish with this Sunday, but please join me in prayer to finish up. Most beloved Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you so much for a beautiful day today, allowing us to gather as brothers and sisters, your children, Heavenly Parent. Sometimes it's hard to see even myself as your child. Sometimes we are our own harshest critics. And we also pass that criticism and harshness onto others, Heavenly Parent. But I pray that we can learn from our true parents, that despite the truth that might need to be said, and despite evils and wrongs in this world, there's always a way to love. There's always a way to display your true love to people. And God, I know this is what transforms people's hearts. Too many times, if we make a mistake, we expect to be judged. We expect to be disciplined. We expect all the vilification or harshness to follow, Heavenly Parent. And while we might need to learn a lesson, I pray that we can also realize that your love is there for us, and that when we experience that love and when we can give that love, it can heal all hearts, Heavenly Parent. Thank you so much for your eternal and unchanging patience and kindness and love for us. And I pray that we can continue throughout our lives to search to return that beauty to you. And I offer this prayer in my name, Michael and Donia Hendrick, Blessed Angel Family. Amen and adieu.